Hello and welcome to Board Game Gumbo. Today we're unboxing Sierra West from Board and Dice Games. This is a game for 1 to 4 players that plays in 40 to 60 minutes. It is a Euro style game. It's got some tableau building in it, as well as a really interesting puzzle element where you're playing cards as your action, but you have to overlay the cards to generate the actions you're taking. So I'll explain that a little bit better when we get to the cards. Here's our rule book, which is fairly large. One of the interesting parts of this game is that it comes with 4 modules. Whenever you start to play a game, you're going to decide which module you want to use, and that will change not only how the game is played to a certain extent, but also there are specific pieces and mechanics to each module. So the first time you play, they suggest you play with the Apple Hill module, but there's also the Boats and Banjos module, which lets you go fishing. There's the Gold Rush module, and then there's maybe my favorite, which is the Outlaws and Outposts module. So here you can see the different components specific to the 4 different modules. Base gameplay is pretty standard among the 4 modules. I'm going to stick mostly to that gameplay and kind of leave out the different module specific rules, but obviously you can see them here in the rule book. Okay, we have some Punchboard here. So it looks like we've got some promos here for Teotihuacan, so I'll put those aside. And some for Dice Settlers as well. That's kind of interesting. So here are our 2 major tracking boards. These are different aspects of the game that you can basically increase your level in. And as you increase your level, you're getting resources, but you're also getting point modifiers. So that the way the game works is that in-game scoring, you're going to basically include all your modifiers, and those will make up your points. So if you have all 3 of your tracks at this 3, you'd have 3 plus 3 times 3 times 3. You also include another mechanic or another track into this. So you can see how your points can kind of scale that way. So this board is specifically for the Apple module, and then this board will be used in all modules. And you've got some little pieces down here to signify 5 or 10 times resources, just so you don't run out of them. So here we have our little cabin track. Cabins are things you can build during the course of the game, and they give you basically modify your actions throughout the course of the game. We've got some resource tokens, so the fish are obviously only used in the Boats module. These boot tokens are used in everything, and then these outlaw tokens are only used in the outlaw module. This is all really thick cardboard, and it all punches out really well, so there's no complaints there. Here's our first player token. This never moves. The in-game condition allows for the game to go back to the first player, so everybody has the same number of rounds, and then you play one more. So this basically just tracks for that in-game condition. You've got some carts here, which is only used in the Gold Rush module. And then you've got cabins here. So the way the cabins work is you'll have a stack of them, and you can build them throughout the course of the game. And then on your turn, you can assign a worker to a cabin, and it will modify certain actions. So for instance, if we built this cabin, and then on one of our turns, we assign one of our workers to this cabin, every time on that turn, we would gain 1 wood. Instead, we'll gain 2. And this will be on this little board here. You'll have 4 out at a time, and then a stack of them to replace them, essentially. Here we've got an extra little piece only included when you do the fishing module. And then this piece is only for the Apple module. Lastly, we've got these hunt tokens, and these are character specific. So every player is going to have one set of them, essentially. So you're going to have one fox, one badger, I believe, one deer, one beaver, hare, raccoon, a bear, and a meerkat, which may be one of the expansions. I'm not certain. The way that these work is when other players are taking their actions, the cards they play may give you the ability to hunt one of these creatures. And you want to do that because these creatures are going to start on this side. And on this side, they give you negative points at the end of the game. Also, whenever you hunt, you're going to flip them over. And now this tile modifies your fur trapping action, which is an action you can take during the course of the game. It has this little pelt icon. Now, every time you take this fur trapping action, you're going to get a wood. Initially, if you haven't hunted any creatures, your fur trapping action will give you nothing. But if you've hunted multiple, then whenever you take that fur hunting action, you're going to get all the resources listed on those creatures. So there's a couple different reasons that you want to do this. Here we have our player board, or our game board, which we'll punch out and we'll snap together like that. So there's a couple different things here. One is that you'll have a worker who specifically climbs the mountain, and he'll start here. The mountain itself will be comprised of cards lined up in almost like a mahjong type scenario. And then down here, you have a wagon, which will move across this track. And again, here's the modifiers that we were talking about, the ×2 and ×3. You want your wagon as far along as you can get it, because obviously that's going to multiply your points. You also have spots down here for 6 cards. That's the in-game trigger, as well as the cards are specific to the module. So they'll give you special actions that you can take that are specific to whatever module you're playing. Down here, we've got our player pieces. So each player is going to have their own wagon token. If you're playing with the fishing module, you'll have your boat. And there's also a die as well, which I believe is only used in the Gold Rush module. Those are some of the player pieces you'll have. And then should be another bag. Here we go. So each player is also going to have 3 meeples. So I don't quite remember which one is which, but one of these is going to be your climber, the person who goes up the mountain. And then these 2, one of them is for the green actions you can take, and one for the tan actions. And I'll explain that a little bit better when we get to the action cards. We got bags for resources. So basic resources in the game. We got food, wood, and stone. We've also got gold, which is obviously pretty important during the Gold Rush module, but it's used in all modules. They have special uses specifically for gold. You can trade it in for resources, although it's not a wild resource. And it's also worth points at the end of the game if you have any left over. And then each player is also going to have a certain number of tabs in their color to track apples or to track your progress on the different boards. So here we got a turn structure card. So on the back, you've got a little cheat sheet just for things like final scoring, what counts as final scoring, what the different icons mean. But on the front, you've got your turn structure. And this will be a lot easier to explain once we get to the cards, so I'll hold off on that. We've got our player boards here, one for each player, which have a very unique shape, and there's a reason for that, which we'll get to right now because here are our cards, which are a big part of the game. And this is how you determine what action you're going to take on your turn. So let's look at these real quick. These look like the module-specific cards, so we can take a quick look at these. Each module is going to have cards specific to it, and those are going to be laid out in that mountain tableau in sort of a mahjong fashion, where the lowest row will be covered up partially by the row above it, onwards and onwards until you get to the top row, which is only 2 cards. These cards have a special back because they're specific to the apple module, and there will be a total of 6 of them. One of them will start in play, and the other 5 will start in that tableau of cards. When all 6 of them are revealed, they'll immediately go down onto this area, and then that'll trigger the end of the game. So here we have special cards for the different modules. So here are the special cards that will be out for the boats module, the fishing module. And then there's a card that starts in everybody's deck that's specific to the module. So if you're playing the fishing module, this card will be in each player's deck, although it starts at the very bottom of their deck. Got more cards for the fishing module there. These are the 6 cards that would be out in the mountain tableau for the fishing module. And then here we have the Gold Rush module cards. And then the starting cards for the Gold Rush module, and so on. So, and here are the Gold Rush cards that'll be out in the tableau. And then Outlaw cards. So let's find the starting cards. So each player is going to start with a deck of cards. And from that deck of cards, every round you're going to draw 3 cards. Your deck of cards is going to be the same, mostly the same, regardless of what module you're playing. You're just going to add 1 card depending on the module. So if you're playing with the boat module, you're going to add 1 card at the very bottom of your deck. After you shuffle it, you're going to add it to the very bottom. So it's one of the final cards you'll have access to. Otherwise, you're just going to have a starting deck, and those are going to be denoted by these hats on them. So there's the blue starting deck, and then the green starting deck, and so on. So let's look at one of these starting decks and explain what you'll be doing on your turn. So there's a couple things you can do, and those are mostly determined by your workers. So I said you got the 1 worker that climbs up the mountain. He'll be on that board. On your main board, you'll have these 2 workers, and you can see their icons here. You also have cabins down here, which you obviously won't have any at the start of the game, but you can build them while you're playing. You'll also have over here, you'll have all your hunt tiles. You have a tan cabin, and then you have the mule cabin, which only the mule can go to. And then finally down here, you just have a scoring reminder about cards you acquire. So on your turn, you're going to shuffle your deck, and you're going to draw 3 cards from your deck. And then with those 3 cards, you're going to arrange them in such a way that they're going to fit into these slots, giving you a tan track at the bottom for your tan worker to go across, to walk across like that, giving you a green track all the way across for your green worker, and then giving you 3 actions at the top, as well as 2 animals, because the center animal is going to get covered up. So on these actions, if they're in a white border, they're optional. And if they're in a red border, they're mandatory. So let me just go ahead and put one of these together real quick. So let's say I want to put my actions together like this, right? So I'm going to slide these cards in like this. Like so. Now, before I take my actions for my tableau, every other player has an option right now to do their trapping action. Because I'm showing the beaver here and the fox here, they could choose to use either one of their workers, because the action says either worker, and then hunt one of those creatures, which would simply allow them to flip over that token. And again, they don't get anything immediately. They're just preventing the loss of these points at the end of the game. And then when they take this fur trapping action later, they're going to get whatever resources they're showing. They don't have to do that. They may not want to do that, but that is an option they have. This other action you see here is another action, an out of turn action like this one. This one applies mostly when a player goes up on this track. So you'll start here at the 0. And if I take an action that moves me up on this track, other players can take an out of turn action to gain this resource for that track. Me, as the person going up on the track, I'm going to gain this resource, which is better. But any other player can gain this one. by taking that out of turn action right there. So we have our cards set up, and after players decide if they're going to take their trapping action, then I get to move my workers. Now what I could do is I could move my workers all the way across both tracks, which is obviously pretty appealing because I'm going to get all these resources that you see in white, or the opportunity to gain all those resources. Again, they're optional. Another thing I could do is I could assign one of my workers instead to one of the cabins that I have built down here, which obviously I don't have any built, but say that I did. So say I had this cabin built down there. It shows that specific worker, so I have to use that worker if I want to activate it. But I could take this worker, and instead of going across this track and taking all those actions, I could put him on this cabin, and now I've activated that cabin for this round. What that cabin does is it says when I take this action, which is here or here, once per round, I can ignore one cost. So basically, if I move this guy here, I can take this action without paying this cost, which is just a resource, any resource. But I don't have a cabin, or maybe I don't want, it's not worth it to me to do that. So I've decided that I want to move both of my workers all the way across their tracks. That's going to be my turn. So that's pretty straightforward. This worker moving here gives me 2 wood, because that's what the icon shows. This worker moving here allows me to take a shovel action. There's 2 things you can do with a shovel action. One is you can build a cabin. And again, the cabins are going to be on their own little market board, and that market board tells you what they cost. So we have our market board here. There'll be 4 cabins laid out. So if I choose to take this shovel action and pay this 1 resource that's listed here, I could build whatever cabin is here and just put it onto my game board. Also, you'll notice there's the same -3 on all the cabins as well, because if you don't build all your cabins, you're going to get negative points at the end of the game. I could also build one of these 3 cabins, but these cost additional resources. So this one will cost me another of any resource, another of any resource, and this one specifically costs 1 of these boot tokens. Anytime you buy a cabin, if it's the rightmost cabin, the other 3 are just going to slide down and you'll replace the last one. If you buy a cabin and it's not the rightmost cabin, then the rightmost cabin is going to get removed, and then everything will slide down and you'll refill until you have all 4 spots. And that'll happen immediately. So then I could move this worker here, it gets 2 stone, and then I could move him here and build again. And I'm moving just the 1 worker, but you can do this in any order you want. I could have moved this guy here and then decided to move this guy here at that point. And again, you're going to gain whatever's on these cards. There are certain resources on the cards. There's certain actions. You have stone and wood and food, the 3 basic resources. You have build actions. You even have some negative actions as well. This boot action allows you to either move your climber piece up on the mountain or move your wagon across to the right. This mule piece, or this mule icon here, gives you the mule meeple, which allows you to take special actions. You can use it at its tavern, or you can use it to take an additional one of these actions. Because when your workers get all the way to the right, they now have these arrows, which will allow them to take the actions at the top of your cards. So this action is pay 2 stone and 1 food to move up 1 spot on the gray track here. This one is pay 2 wood and a stone to move up on the brown track. And this one is pay 2 gold to move your wagon 1 space, ignoring any cost associated with that movement. Once your 2 workers have either been assigned to a cabin or some other action, or they've done all the actions that you want them to do on your turn is over. At the end of your turn, your workers are going to return to their starting spot. So they'll be available for these off-turn actions. Your cards are going to get discarded, and you're going to draw 3 more cards from your deck. That's pretty much everything you need to know to play Sierra West. Now, obviously, I've not really talked about the modules at all, and they do add some really interesting aspects to the game that I enjoy. We also haven't really gotten into building the mountain itself, but that's simply a selection of cards that gets built over each other to create a peak. And again, the in-game trigger is the 6 cards in that tableau being revealed and placed onto the main board. And at that point, you'll play back to the last player so that everybody's had the same number of actions. And then you'll play one final round. At the end of the game, you're going to score points. We've already talked about how you score points based off of the location of your wagon and also where you are on these various tracks. But you also score points based off of any cards you've acquired from the mountain. And you do that through shovel actions. You have to get your climber all the way to the top of the mountain, wherever the top may currently be, and then take a shovel action to acquire the card that he is standing on. And those cards will go to your deck and become additional cards that you can play on your turn. And then also at the end of the game, you'll score based off of how many of those cards you have in your deck at the end of the game. And that's it. That's everything you get in a copy of Sierra West from Board and Dice Games.